Hi, my name's Charlie King. I'm with Heroic Fatherhood, and welcome to your Mentor's Moment. In today's question, a dad asks, how do you guys deal with grandparents not doing what they've been asked to do when looking after our kids? Wow, this can be a tricky question, right? Because having grandparents who are willing to babysit is a huge boon, but it can be totally frustrating if what they're doing is counter to the way that you parent or the way you want to parent or the expectations you have for your kids or how they might grow up. So let's jump right in and take a look at it, because the benefits for having grandparents babysit are huge. First of all, they're free. Second of all, if they're local, they're willing to, and often they're super flexible. They can just show up on a moment's notice and go, yeah, I've got the kids for a little while. They're already known to you. They don't need background checks. They don't have any of the weird financial pieces that babysitters or nannies or any of the other au pairs or some of the more high-end ways of taking care of your children do. So that's a super huge benefit. And they're your family. They know you. They know how to get in touch with you. They know the way you live. Your kids are super comfortable with them already because it sounds like they're local. So there's huge benefits to having grandparents take care of your kids. Now, the challenge can be that who your grandparents were as parents is different than who you are as a parent. As a matter of fact, you may parent differently because of the way they parented. So this can be a little bit of a tricky place to navigate your way through, but let's see if we can jump in it together. So remember that your parents, the grandparents, or your wife's parents, the grandparents, are parenting from what they remember of parenting however many years ago, whether that's 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 20 years ago, and parenting was dramatically different. Whether you were a latchkey kid from the 90s, whether you were a runabout from the 80s, whether you were a super special child where everybody gets a trophy from the aughts, I guess they call the O's. All of those periods were different, and what we thought was good parenting has changed and dramatically shifted over time. So their parenting is different than yours, and their memory of parenting is different than yours. But also because they're grandparents, they're going to be different than they were with you. So many things can change. And rules that were hard and fast when you were a kid growing up, they may now realize were not that big a deal and are super lax as grandparents. So this is often something that I hear is like, we have expectations for behavior for the kids, or we have expectations about what they're exposed to, or bedtimes, or TV, or ratings on things, or the types of food they eat, or the way that they interact with the kids, or where they go, that your grandparents do not have. So it sounds like, I'm kind of guessing from the tenor of your question, that you'd like to keep having your grandparents babysit, or your wife's grandparents babysit, but how do you navigate the fact that they're doing it in a way that you would prefer they didn't? Now, because they're not paid, you only get so much say over this. Now, remember, a nanny or a babysitter are going to do exactly what you say because that's how they make their living. What your parents or your wife's parents do is a gift of love. They do it for no money. So we don't get to say a ton about how they do what they do. We hope to make suggestions and help them understand how and why we parent the way we do, and invite them to come join us on that journey. That's kind of how I like to describe it. The first thing I might suggest is really getting an eyeball on how big a deal is this? Is this worth the fight? Is this worth putting free childcare at risk and putting relationships at risk because you have a disagreement about the way the kids should be taken care of? For instance, if you like to have nothing but organic food for your kids and your grandparents decide to give them Kraft macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, I can totally see that if you had a nanny or a babysitter, you might say, hey, only use food in the house, or this is what our expectation is of the way you feed them. But the grandparents may not have that or be willing to do that. The question is it worth the fight? Is it worth the fight to put relationships at risk, or is it worth the fight to lose your free babysitting? Or is it one of those things like, well, It's special time when you go to grandma and grandpa's. You get to eat what you get to eat, or you get to watch TV, or you get to stay up later than we would have you stay up. And that's what happens at grandma and grandpa's. But when you come back home, we have expectations for how the rhythm is at our house. So you go enjoy your time with grandma and grandpa, but when you return, we're going to go back to the way we do things. So that's the first thing is it worth it? Is it worth actually getting into a conflict about this? Very often it's just not, and it's a parenting style as opposed to a safety issue. If it's a safety issue, that's a whole different thing. What I might suggest is sitting down with your grandmother, sitting down with your grandfather, and talk a little bit about your parenting philosophy, what you've learned about yourself, what you've learned about parenting, what you've learned about who you want to be in the world and the way you want to raise your kids. Now, sharing your parenting philosophy can help them understand why you parent the way you do and why some things are more important than others. It took us years for my mother to understand why we chose the alternative education path that we did for our kids. And even at the end, she didn't understand, frankly. And that was okay. She didn't necessarily agree. She didn't necessarily understand. And that was okay. We just had to let it be like that. Just be aware that by sitting down and entering into a conversation about your philosophy about parenting, their radar might go up right away that you may be disapproving of their parenting style while you're out of the house. You can always make direct requests. Hey, I totally get that you're taking care of the kids and you're being super great and the kids love visiting with you, but we really try to limit our TV watching time to under 2 hours a day, or our phone time, after 8 p.m. or whatever that thing is. Would you be willing to help us set that structure for our kids and do that at your place as well? Now, you may get pushback. They may go, well, we don't think it's that important. Stop being such a busybody, or stop worrying about it so much. And then you'll find out really quickly. So the bottom line is they're your kids, they're nobody else's, and you do get to say. And for you, this is a little bit of a tricky navigation. Is this important enough that we should have a conversation about it? How do we address it in such a way that it's not confronting and we're not judging the way they are grandparenting or retroactively judging the way they parented us? Is it really worth it? And if it is, how do we approach it in such a way that's supportive and is around education and not about judgment? Because if we can come at it from a place where you're like, hey, I wanted to share something with you that we do at the house that it sounds like you guys don't. I would love it if you could support us by doing the same at your place. See, if we can come at it from like what I like to call a co-creative perspective, if we can come at it from a partnering place, you'll be much more likely to get alignment with your parents or your wife's parents. And then we all get to move forward. This was such a great question. Thank you so much for asking, and keep the questions coming. We're loving all the questions that you guys are bringing to us. So I have a question for you. If you're watching this video, how would you have addressed this dad's issue? Do you have a question of your own you'd like to ask us? And lastly, remember, we become better men by spending time with good men. This has been the Mentors Moment. We come every week with questions from real dads who are entrepreneurs and fathers who have questions that they'd like a different perspective on, they like some insight on, or maybe even some straight up advice on. Again, my name's Charlie King. This has been your Mentors Moment. Have a great day.